We have on Mr. Dwayne Yancey today. He is an editor at the Cardinal News. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here. How are y'all?
Oh,
Thank
we're
you.
doing good. I think I can speak for both me and Ethan when I say it's an honor to have you on today.
So,
Well, it's an honor to be invited. So,
thank you. Yeah.
Thank
honor all around.
you. Well, to start out, we always ask the same question. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, specifically Rockingham County. Even more specifically, eastern Rockingham County near the little town of McGackysville, which is pronounced nothing like expelled. Uh, I grew up on a chicken farm. Um, and I can tell you stories of chicken farming if you'd like to hear those.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Please
Absolutely.
do.
That's what we do this for.
Well, people often ask me how I got into journalism, and my flip answer is I grew up on a chicken farm.
Hmm.
Uh, um, and there is some truth to that. It became apparent to me early on that I was not cut out for farming. Farming is hard work.
It is, yes.
And yeah, the thing about farming, I mean, this is, no doubt true of any kind of farming, but particularly chicken farming. Yeah, there's never a day off. You can't tell the chickens, don't bother laying this weekend. I'm going out of town. No, they have to, be taken care of every day. So, when I was a kid, I would come home from school and I would have to go gather eggs because you gather them twice a day. And, that was how we made our money, was selling eggs. Um, and for a while, I had dreams of being an NFL kicker because there would be some roosters in among the chickens, and they would sometimes try to fight, and they would come charging at you, and I developed what I thought was a pretty good kicking style to deal with it. My father didn't appreciate that, um, but I was like 10 years old. I was like, I want this rooster away from me. It's there, pecking at my leg, and I had dreams I was going to be an NFL kicker. That there was this automatic uh, feeder, little trough that ran through the chicken house, and it'd be full of food, and we'd go around, and that's how chickens would get their food. And I was like, man, I can kick that rooster over the trough, and so I thought I was hot stuff. Um, but apparently, to be an NFL kicker, you have to do better than that. So. Um, so
Slightly different shape.
Yeah.
yeah. um, but yeah, I grew up on a farm in Rockingham County. I was always like the nerd who, was reading newspapers when I was in the fourth grade. I was always interested in what was going on, in the world. And that led me into journalism.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the chicken farm, of course. Did your family own that farm? And
Yeah.
I was assuming it was your father. How many chickens did y'all have exactly? Was it a large operation?
Um, I was not on the business end of it. I was on the business end of gathering the eggs and fighting off the roosters. So I don't know exactly how many chickens we had. I do know at the time we had a chicken house built, and at the time it was the biggest chicken house in that part of eastern Rockingham County. And within about 5 years, they were no longer building them that small. That was how fast the poultry industry grew to, sort of a mass produced, operation. Um, I mean, I'm guessing, they were probably in the thousands.
So
It's a substantial number.
A lot more than just your backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was a
Chicken coop.
backyard operation. This, I mean, one time we had maybe half a dozen chicken houses. Some of those were very small, and nowadays would be considered very antiquated. Even the big one we built might be considered antiquated today. But I mean, it was, for the time, it was an industrial scale chicken operation.
Yeah.
I know a lot of our friends at school have chickens in their backyard and they harvest the eggs and
3 or 4
sometimes
though,
sell them.
not
Yeah,
many, not many at all.
thousands, maybe 5,
Some
6.
local elementary schools around the area also had some
Yeah.
chicken coops to teach the kids. So that was always pretty neat, but yet nothing like that.
Not in thousands.
This is completely unrelated to what you probably want to talk about, but what I remember most from, and this also explains why I was not cut out to be a farmer. You would get the chickens on a contract basis, and you would have them, I'm going to say, for maybe about 10 or 11 months. And then basically you would burn them out, in terms of egg production. And, a truck would come and take them off to, basically get turned into chicken nuggets, I suppose. We were a little hazy on that point. But our contract, and in between, when one flock of chickens left and another one came in, you had to clear out the poultry house of all the litter and manure, which was not a pleasant job. It was even less pleasant because for us, that changeover time was always in August. So imagine the hottest month of the year dealing with chicken manure, which is not a pleasant smell.
No, it's not.
We have a chicken facility about 45 minutes from us, and the smell down there sometimes is incredible.
Yeah,
I mean it's pungent.
In those days, you would get people moving into the county because they wanted, fresh air of country living.
Yeah, I know.
And, suddenly in August, the farmers, man, that chicken manure is really good manure. Man, you could put that on the field and it would, grow anything. But, somehow those people who came for the fresh country air did not appreciate that smell.
Yeah. Strange how that works.
You mentioned country air. So you grew up in Rockingham County?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk about growing up in a rural setting? Because we grew up in a rural setting. Yeah. Can you talk about your experiences with that and the pros and cons of it?
Well, I still live in a rural area, just a different one. So I'm not the right person to talk to for the cons, because I would much prefer this to
me too.
Someplace else. And even today, with Cardinal, we cover Southwest and South Side. Part of that is because I'm personally interested in rural areas, and I'm sure that goes back to having grown up in one and wanting to live in one. There's some obvious, there are pros and cons to everything in terms of opportunity. In some ways, there is more opportunity in a rural area. I mean, it depends on what opportunity you're looking for. But, thinking ahead, here to, leadership in the community. I mean, a lot of rural areas are, desperate to have young adults and, are desperate to have people, step forward to take some sort of leadership position in whatever kind of civic activity there is. You would not get that opportunity in a more urban area. Obviously, there are different types of jobs that, are available or aren't available in a rural area. Although, to the extent now that some jobs can be done remotely, that's changing.
My mom works remotely some days. It's interesting, the dynamic, because before the pandemic had happened, it didn't exist. And now that the pandemic has happened, her company's a lot more open to her working remotely. And I see that happening with my friend's family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, here at Cardinal, we all work remotely. I mean, before... Right. Okay. I worked at the Roanoke Times for 39 years. So for 39 years, I got up every day and had to drive into Roanoke, and then drive home at night. Even when the pandemic started, still had to do that because, at the time I didn't have broadband. So.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. That certainly.
I'm sure that has to.
The pandemic certainly changed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we launched Cardinal, we were all remote. We have no physical office, and we're in multiple, places. I'm in Bogota County, somewhere in Roanoke. We've got people in Bristol, Martinsville, Danville, Lynchburg, Richmond. I think that's great.
Yeah. Certainly gives you opportunities to
coverage.
have more coverage. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I love it because it saves me time every day. I don't have to, spend 30 minutes or so driving into Roanoke and back. I just need to,
Just wake up.
wake up
Walk.
and go to the other side of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel that it has an impact on your productivity? Because a lot of companies will cite decreased productivity with remote work, and I'm not really sure if that's accurate.
I don't. I feel more productive. One, because I'm not losing all that driving time. If people are not productive, remotely, I wonder whether they're really good employees.
Right.
If they're only productive because, somebody's there in the office looking over their shoulder, that's
Probably not. Yeah.
yeah,
Not the best
probably
employee.
not.
Yeah.
So, that has not been a problem for us. Now, there is, the downside is it's harder to draw a sharp line between when you're working and when you're not working.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Do you
so
set it aside at a certain time of day and not look at it again, or do you really struggle with that, deciding when to put it up for the day?
I'm one who can't really put it up.
But that means you love it. So
Yeah. And also sort of the nature of our job, news happens at all hours.
right.
A few nights ago, we were waiting on a story that was coming in late. Had that been at the paper, I'd have had to stay at the paper till, well, we finally finished at 1 a.m. It was a very late story. But at the paper, I'd have had to stay in town. Here, I can go sit on the couch, do whatever. And then I get a message, okay, it's in. Okay, I'll, walk in here, fire up the laptop, and off we go. So I'm quite fine with that sort of fuzzy line between work and not work. Others may not be.
So to look back to your childhood for a minute, you said that you read the newspaper a lot when you were a kid. Did you also read a lot of books as a child or when you were in school?
A fair amount, yeah. Now you don't ask me which ones because I may have a hard time remembering. But I was a frequent library goer.
And did you show any aptitude for writing very early on, or is that something that you developed later?
I think pretty early on. Probably about the time I realized I was not going to be an NFL kicker.
Is this maybe middle school age that we're talking, or high school?
Probably like elementary school. I was also an only child, so I had to entertain myself. And so read a lot of books and
Yeah. Did your high school have a student newspaper?
Yeah, we had a student paper.
Okay.
I was the editor of it. We thought we were pretty good. And that was a big deal back then. Is there a high school newspaper at your school?
There used to be.
But not anymore. I don't really know why it died, but
it's something that you're not seeing as often anymore. But we used to have one.
Mm-hmm. It was popular, right?
Yeah,
but not anymore.
Not anymore. No, and we're not really sure when it stopped happening at the high school. But
you should probably ask one of the teachers who's been there for 30 years.
Yeah. I would like to think that now in the internet age, every school ought to have a paper,
right?
Online.
Digitally, it'd be easier.
Yeah. You don't have to pay for print,
No.
Put up a
Yeah,
website.
That is a good idea, especially just teaching kids how to write,
Right.
too. It could be an extracurricular activity, not
maybe a club.
Maybe a club. But
that's how it was at my school. It was not a class. It was.
We do have a yearbook class,
but it's
A, it's not very involved, and B, it's in a class format, right? You have assignments, you have deadlines, and like that emulates a certain environment, sure, but a lot of the kids
not really conducive to inspiring that work as you would get if it was if it was more of an elective course for people, not mandatory. But you said earlier about your NFL kicking career. Were you very academic growing up?
Yeah.
Not I make them athletic growing up.
So. No, I was terrible. I was skinny and uncoordinated and not very good. Which is why I briefly entertained, well, man, I could be a kicker. You don't have to be big to be a kicker. Look at that rooster go, man. I could make it. No. But to continue that, I also love sports. I was not one of those people that wasn't good at sports and therefore hated sports. So I thought, man, I could be a sports writer. Get to go to games, write about games. I was big into that. For a long time, that was my goal, was to be a sports writer.
Yeah.
That was sort of what prompted me toward journalism.
Okay.
I never actually became a sports writer. I got into other aspects of writing, but that was sort of where it began. I'm still a big sports fan.
Yeah.
So when you were in high school, did you know that you wanted to become a writer?
Pretty much. I don't know how much, I articulated that then, but
you knew deep inside.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I knew. There was a brief period in college where I thought I might want to be a lawyer, go to law school. And then I did an internship one summer with a law office in Harrisonburg, and it was just boring. Now maybe I had the wrong law firm, the wrong internship, but they had me researching cases. I mean, it was not make work. It was
sure.
Now they did a lot of real estate law, and that wasn't as interesting as something else, but they're
it was law work.
Yeah, it was law work, and I remember going up to the the local law library to they sent me off to research some cases, and I just found it got very interesting.
Yeah, that's understandable.
So where did you go to college at?
I went to JMU, James Madison University.
Yeah.
Partly because that was near home, and it was cheaper to live at home than live on campus.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Absolutely.
What was your major?
I majored in political science because I was always interested in politics. Again, not participating, but sort of following it from the standpoint of sports. And there are a lot of similarities. There are winners and losers.
Yeah, that's true. So you enjoyed analyzing more than participating?
Oh yeah.
Did you ever consider, or have you ever considered in your career running for political office?
No. I'm not a participant in that way. I'm much more. I would no more do that than I would run out on the field at an NFL game. I would much rather sit there in the stands and say, "Oh, that team's ahead," or "Man, that quarterback is not doing well."
Not good.
So can you tell us a little bit about your college experience? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it?
I did. Yeah, I did enjoy it. I worked for the college paper.
Okay.
And it started off really as just sort of a hobby and extracurricular, way to get involved. And ended up, man, this is fun, So that was a very formative experience. When this is showing my age, and I hate to do that. When I first went there, it was still called Madison College. It became James Madison when I was there. And JMU then was a lot different than JMU now. Now you drive up the interstate, and JMU is on both sides of the interstate. Back in my day, that one whole side of the interstate was still forest land.
Right. Was there any particular professors that had an impact on you in school?
Yeah. I mean, in no particular order, David Wendelken and Alan Nicholas were the journalism instructors. Both are retired, but both still living. And I'm still in touch with both of them. So, yeah, they were big influences.
Were they influential because of the coursework or the style of teaching? Or...
Their lecturing type?
Yeah.
More. I mean, what I remember most is talking to them outside class.
Right. Yeah.
Now this, any teachers listening in on this may want to step away for a bit, because I'm about to give some advice they may not like. Yeah, most of what I remember from school is not from a classroom. It's from the overall experience. Now, yeah, I'm sure there are things in the classroom that are useful, and that I absorb, but that is not what I remember. I remember getting advice from them, talking outside class, informally, all that kind of thing. Same in high school with the teacher who was the advisor for the high school newspaper, which wasn't a class. I was in after school activity.
The deep conversations that are one-on-one.
Yeah. You'll learn a lot from that type of stuff too. I mean, that's what we're learning from the podcast. Right. Just learning how to really have that conversation with people, and you gain a lot from it. You really do. Yeah. You finished college. Did you have employment lined up after school?
No. I mean, a lot of people now. The other day, I was on a train coming back from D.C., and it was a Sunday night, and it was like the student train, because it was full of students from UVA and Liberty and Virginia Tech. Train stopped in Charlottesville. Half the train got off. Get to Lynchburg. All the Liberty students got off. Get to Roanoke. All the Tech students got off. And they were talking about papers and professors. Well, the two students who were in front of us, the one guy was talking about how he had already had at least one job interview. I'm thinking, man, that didn't happen back in my day. My day, you graduate, then you look for a job. Things have changed. Short version, no, I did not have employment lined up. I graduated at an odd time. I was a December graduate, rather than the regular schedule. So I spent that spring living at home and freelancing for the local paper, the Harrisonburg paper. And actually, I guess I was a sports writer, because what I was writing were sports stories that they assigned me. Because as you know, spring sports is like the busiest time of the year for high schools. All the focus is on football in the fall, and then basketball in the winter. In the spring, you got all these other sports. They just don't get much attention or attendance. So they had me covering all the sports that they didn't want to cover. Right. So I remember writing about track. I remember writing about bowling, like a high school thing. Bowling. Some bowling champion, some hunter who had won some, arrow shooting contest for, bow and arrow. And then got a job that June and had been employed ever since.
Right. Okay. Did you go to that Harrisonburg paper because it was sports related, or just because it was a journalism job?
It was local.
Yeah.
And I knew, the sports editor there had gone to JMU. I knew him. I knew him. He knew me.
It worked out.
For him, I was like, cheap labor to do the stories they didn't want to do,
right.
But I felt they needed to do. For me, it was good experience. It was fun.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you said earlier that you worked for the Roanoke Times. When did you start working for them?
Was it that June?
No. My first job was in Richmond with a magazine that's long since out of business, Commonwealth magazine. I was there for about 2 years, and then came to Roanoke long before y'all were born, in 1982, and was there for 39 years.
Wow, okay. That's impressive.
Commonwealth magazine. Can you talk about the differences between working for a magazine format and then working for a newspaper format?
Well, the obvious one is, the magazine was a monthly magazine, so, the deadlines. I mean, you had deadlines, but they were, much more relaxed. With the newspaper, newspaper comes out every day.
Got to get it out.
Yeah. That's sort of the main one. Also, that was not very well known. whereas the Roanoke Times was. And, what I found was, when I was with Commonwealth Magazine, you call someone up for an interview, you would have to explain, who or what Commonwealth Magazine was. With the newspaper, man, you could call somebody on the other side of the country, and all you had to say was, "I'm with the newspaper in Roanoke, Virginia."
Right,
and
they know.
They understood what that was.
Did the area of Roanoke attract you to the Roanoke Times, or was it being a newspaper specifically? What made you?
Or the stature of the newspaper? I mean, it's pretty big.
It's respectable. It's huge.
Yeah.
Really.
All that. I wanted to live in the western part of the state. I did not like Richmond. I grew up, west of the Blue Ridge, and wanted to be west of the Blue Ridge.
Come back home.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Roanoke Times. A few months ago, we interviewed Walter Rugaber.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was an awesome interview.
Yeah, we got to get to his house and do a 2.5-hour interview with him. He was great. So.
Oh, yeah. He's a legend.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he started at the paper about the same time I did.
Did you work closely with him, or were you kind of more separate?
Well, he was way up here in the food chain, and I was way down there. So,
right.
He knew who I was, but
yeah,
there were lots of people in between.
Yeah. Sure. Last week we interviewed Beth Macy too.
Oh yeah.
So we've been trying to hit as many journalists as we could.
We're kind of making the rounds lately.
So
yeah. You're getting all the big ones there. Yeah.
But we'd love to hear some stories about your time at the Roanoke Times. Sure. I mean, we've heard from a few different perspectives and a few different areas of the Roanoke Times, but we'd love to hear it from your perspective.
Sure. Anything in particular?
No, just your general time there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm terrible at remembering stories, but I've got sort of a few standard ones to tell. Newspapers today are in such a shrunken state. We can talk later if you want about why that is. But I remember in 1989, there's a governor's race going on that year, and I was one of multiple people covering the governor's race. And I was assigned to follow the Republican candidate for governor, Marshall Coleman, who eventually lost. So if you don't remember his name, that's why. But it was a close race, and the president at the time was President Bush, the first President Bush, George H.W. Bush. And he was coming in late in the campaign to do 2 appearances for Coleman, one in Richmond, one in Norfolk. I was there at the one in Richmond, and that was all that we were signed up for. But then, I forget the details now, but somebody said, okay, the plane, if you want to go to the Norfolk event, go here and, we'll put you on the press plane. Well, sure. You want to cover, the president campaigning for, the candidate? Yeah. I mean, it just seemed a very natural thing to me, And again, this was, the security then was much different. So, this is this wasn't Air Force One. This was like the separate press plane, but it was still a monstrous plane. I'm, going up the ramp and my name wasn't on the list. Well, they just put it on the list. Okay.
Oh, okay.
No background check or anything. Come on. Yeah. And it's like a 15-minute flight from Richmond to Norfolk. I mean, that thing had engines like you wouldn't believe. I mean, but most of the time was spent going up and going down. The actual, cruising flight was, very short. Well, I didn't even think about it, like, okay, man, and from my perspective, the president gave a different speech in Norfolk, and I thought it was a better, more newsworthy speech. So I was very excited. Well, about a month later, I'm back at the paper, and I get called in one day, and the paper had gotten a bill from the White House.
Oh.
For the travel.
Oh, no.
And it was like $800 and some.
Oops.
That nobody knew about, and, that was the deal. If you flew on the plane, I mean, I didn't realize that. And, again, that was that was something Walter Rugaber would pay attention to, not me. I was like, man, there's the story. So that's one thing I remember.
Was there anyone upset, or was it kind of just like,
they were happy, but what
sure.
can you do? I mean,
yeah, it happened. Can't change it.
Yeah. Sorry,
that's
I got the story.
It's a cool experience, at least.
They can tell me, Yeah.
So, what areas did you really cover for the Roanoke Times? Because we've talked to a few different people, and they've each covered different beats.
Yeah.
What was your beat?
I covered a bunch of different things. I'm probably best known for covering politics, but I also covered music for a while. And also just a general assignment reporter covering lots of different things. So, crime stories, weather stories. I even wrote one sports story.
Oh yeah.
Was
it a good one?
Well, I thought it was. Highland County is the smallest county in Virginia by population. Fewer than 3,000 people. And so their sports teams are very small. And at the time, their boys basketball team, well, first they were closing in on the state record for the most number of consecutive losses. Not a record you want to have. And then, like about a year later, they were getting better. And the goal was to be there when they finally broke that streak. And we were able to time it exactly. And I was there the night they broke the streak.
Okay.
So that was a good news story.
And it might be that story, but what was your favorite piece that you wrote for the Times, or the one that you remember the most?
I remember that. It's hard to remember one particular one. But, that would be, in the top 5, sure.
Yeah. I have a slightly unorthodox question. Say it's 1996 and it's Tuesday, it's 6:30. What would you be doing?
1996, at that point, I was an editor in the newsroom, and we would have had stories coming in, so I would have probably been reading stories to send them on, to get in the paper. Probably, would have probably tried to leave the office about 7 or so,
Mm-hmm. Not stay too late. Can you kind of cover the differences between being a writer and then being an editor? Because we interviewed a journalist at our local newspaper, the Carroll News, and they're kind of one and the same because there's only 2 of them.
Yeah. And even at Cardinal, I both write and edit, and there are 2 different functions. I think of it this way: if you're writing, at least for me, you need a chunk of time that you can focus on it and write it. It's hard to write, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes someplace else. If you're editing, keep in mind, editing is not just reading somebody else's story. It's giving them direction, giving them advice. That time is really sort of broken up. It may be, this reporter is asking, hey, here's a problem I've got. How should I resolve this? Or, is this more important than that? So it's like, to me, one is sort of horizontal and one is vertical. I find now, my time is sort of divided into 2. I try to do, my editing work here and then do the writing later, because if you try to do it all at the same time, again, it's hard to write, a piece here, a piece there, a piece,
Absolutely.
Can you talk about the process of coming to a person that you know nothing about and interviewing them? What to look for, what to avoid?
Yeah.
Or even approaching a scenario you know nothing about and getting the information that you need from who you need it from.
Sure. Well, the one thing this is not the question you asked, but here's the question I'll answer. Eventually, I may answer your question. When I was involved in hiring at the paper, and even now, certainly looking for good writing skills. But but you can teach writing. The thing that is hardest to teach, and probably impossible to teach, is you can't teach people curiosity. Either they're sort of naturally curious or they're not. And a lot of about journalism, asking interviewing people, is about being curious. And so I would take someone who was curious but whose writing skills weren't quite there over someone who had great writing skills but was afraid to pick up the phone and talk to a stranger. Because at the end think about at the end of the day, or sometimes in the middle of the day, you got to be able to talk to people, and sometimes ask them questions that nobody else would ask. Mayor, why did you embezzle all that money?
Yeah.
So in terms of preparing, if you can do some research on the person, that always helps. Have sort of a plan in mind for here are the things I really want to ask. Things will come up and you got to be able to improvise as you go along. But, here are the three things I really, need to ask. Now, sometimes, you have no preparation time, and at that point you just got to be able to sort of, improvise. And the worst thing is, somebody has their, however many questions prepared, but then they get an unexpected answer, and because they didn't have that question written down, they didn't follow up. You got, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Tell me more.
That's something we try to avoid. We generally like to have a conversational feel to our podcast episodes, but we do have a set of questions that we ask every interviewee, and sometimes I feel like they're a bit robotic, but we also use them to not segue, but start the conversation and just get people talking, get the feeling.
Some softball questions to kind of break the ice at the beginning.
Right.
Or just where are you from? Questions about childhood, because we figured out that if you get somebody talking about their childhood, most of the time it opens them up to further conversation later on, especially when we haven't met somebody before.
Yeah.
And that's a good skill that we've learned from the podcast, meeting people we don't know and being able to talk to them. So that's been very beneficial.
That's an excellent technique. It reminds me of a photographer I know. So that his approach when he was going to photograph someone was, at first, he wouldn't even take out his camera. He would go in, he'd meet the person, talk to them, kind of get the lay of the land. And then once they were comfortable, hey, now I'd like to get my camera out. Because some people freeze up, when there's a camera around. So the softening up is good. The 1996 question you ask is a great one. I've never heard anybody ask that, but that's a really good question.
Thank you. Yeah. I was hoping to see just what the general life would be like, because we'll ask you these kind of broad questions and you can give us a broad answer, but that's really oddly specific and it makes our interviewee think.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's I may steal that one. That's a really good one.
Sure.
I don't know if I had a good answer. I mean, it was an accurate answer. It just wasn't very exciting.
Yeah. No, it was what you were doing. It's authentic. It's what matters.
Yeah, I could probably have been sitting there, wondering, why is that, the reporter promised that story, half an hour ago, why are they still on the phone? I want to go home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we found that journalists usually have other interests in writing, such as books. Have you ever considered writing a book?
You have actually.
Writing a book, but kind of moving into that solely.
Yeah.
Writing books. That's as your main focus instead of working for the paper.
If I thought I could make a living at it, Yeah, I do like the daily excitement of news. I mean, different people get excited about different things. That.
Yeah, something's always happening.
I mean,
The
that
news
was why I
doesn't
like
stop breaking.
newspapers better than magazines. Was man, if something happened, you could write it today.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, I wrote some novels, but have had zero success at getting those published. So I don't think I'm going to be making a living that way.
I did find a book that you published, I want to say maybe in the late 90s, about, I think it was...
about Doug Wilder, yeah.
Yeah. Can you give us a bit of info about it?
Yeah. Well, Doug Wilder was Virginia's first black elected governor. Before he was governor, he was lieutenant governor, first black candidate elected statewide in Virginia. At the time, one of the few in the country. I had covered his campaign for the Roanoke Times. Nowadays the black candidate winning is not that big a deal. Back then, it was a very big deal.
It's a huge story, yeah.
And thought, well, somebody ought to write that history. Why not me? So, I did. And
was it a long process? I couldn't find an official page number online, and I couldn't find any PDF copies of it online.
It's out of print, and it came along in the pre-internet era, so it might as well be on stone tablets or something. You can still find some used copies on eBay or someplace. It took about a year, and keep in mind I was still working. I'm a very fast writer. And in particular, a very fast typist. We were talking earlier about classes. The most useful class I ever had was a typing class. I don't know that they have typing anymore.
We do. In middle school, we had 3 separate classes on it, which, in my opinion, was overdoing it a little bit. But they were incredibly helpful. The first one I learned, it taught me sufficiently well, and I've obviously used it ever since.
In my day, the only people who took typing were generally girls who planned to be secretaries. There were 2 boys in the typing class, me and another guy who I think just got stuck there because he needed a class, and and it was that's a skill I use every day. I couldn't tell you a thing about what I learned in biology class, but thank you, Mrs. Emma Smith, because I use that typing every day.
Do you have this is kind of a weird question, but do you have a highest words per minute that you've typed, that you've tested?
At the time, I don't know what it is now, but at the time I was up to 72 words a minute. I was like the second fastest person in the class.
And I assume this is all on a typewriter as well.
Oh yeah, this was like machines, and they would jam, and
right.
I mean, they were,
I've read that the QWERTY interface is designed to be as spread out as possible to avoid jams, because if you hit 2 keys that were beside each other, the typewriter would often jam. Did you encounter many jams?
Not in that class, but over the years, yeah, particularly with cheap typewriters, all the keys would get all jammed up, and
so hard to fix. You were at the Times for a pretty good duration of time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you saw the advancement of technology
over
that period too. Can you talk about how the advancement of tech affected your time from the beginning at the Roanoke Times to the end?
Sure. I mean, when I came there, we still had typewriters. You wrote your story on a typewriter and handed in a print copy. There were computers, but they bore no resemblance to what we have today. And in fact, if I remember the process correctly, you would type out your story, hand it to an editor, they'd mark it up, and then you would have to type it into the computer. And I won't begin to describe the primitive nature of that technology, but
was it maybe the size of a room or smaller? Like, give us an idea.
It was like about the size of a microwave, and you would get the result. You would type it out on an old floppy disk, and then you'd have to go and put that in some other machine, and it would go do whatever it did. At the end, and I remember once we did get more modern computers, there weren't enough for everybody. So, you had to wait your turn. Well, unfortunately, the rhythm of a newspaper is sort of all the same, because generally, you're working
toward time.
Yeah, all the stories are coming in at once. So, one person would be there writing a story, and the other would be twiddling their thumbs, because they couldn't write theirs, And so when everybody got their own computer, man, that was a big deal. To now, with Cardinal, our whole operation, is on computer.
Can you talk about how the internet specifically changed the Roanoke Times? The drift from print newspaper to online newspaper.
Yeah, because you're seeing that a lot today.
Is Cardinal News in print at all?
No, we're totally
completely online. Right.
Yeah.
So the Roanoke Times is still printed, but it's predominantly online.
Yeah. This is part of sort of the standard talk that I give to people. The big thing that has changed newspapers is the cell phone. Not so much online itself, but more the mobile aspect of it. Partly because that's where most of the traffic is. Most of the traffic is on the mobile, not on desktop. But what has happened is the online world has siphoned away the ad revenue from newspapers. And pardon me for going down this rabbit hole a bit. Newspapers' business model historically was built on about 85% of their revenue came from advertising. The other 15% from subscriptions. People may have felt their subscription price was too high, but really their subscription was being subsidized by all that ad revenue. I was always told that the subscription price was enough to pay for the blank newspaper. If you wanted content, ad revenue paid for that. And for a long time, newspapers were fat and happy because there were few other advertising options. Yeah, there was television. They would get some. Radio would get some. Maybe the billboard company would get some. But, those were your options, if you were an advertiser. Well, then along came the internet. And more importantly, along came social media. And social media has siphoned away almost all of that ad revenue. Newspaper revenues nationwide actually peaked about 2006. So, the internet had been around for a while, and ad revenues were still growing. But around 2006, you started getting Facebook, Twitter, everything else. And they can target people much more precisely. And so if you were a local advertiser, the example I've always give is a true one. He was a wedding photographer in the Roanoke area. In the old days, the only place he could advertise was the Sunday wedding section of the newspaper, even though most people are not getting married in the next 6 months. The people who were, they were looking at the Sunday wedding section. So, he would advertise there, even though he knew most of the ad revenue, most of his ad money was, wasted on people who weren't getting married. Well, suddenly along comes Facebook. He can buy an ad on Facebook, and he can set it up so that it only appears to when people change their relationship status to engaged. and he can geofence it to whatever geographic area he wants to work in. So, wedding photographer in Hillsville could set it for, a 40-mile radius or whatever, and target people very precisely. Well, why wouldn't you do that? Suddenly, all your money that you're spending is going to your intended audience. Well, multiply that over, every other business, and that ad revenue has, just been siphoned away by social media. It's not that people have lost their interest in news. It's that the business model that's supporting news has gone away. So, when I talk to people, I say, a couple things. One, that interest in news has not gone away. People have just transferred it from a collapsing local media that they can no longer get, to national news. So people are much more interested in national news than local news, which is often not good. But that, through history, we have seen delivery mechanisms change. We used to get music on, vinyl records, then CDs, then MP, now it's all streaming. The interest in music has not gone away, but the way we consume it has. So, we as a news business, need to adopt to that, record companies, which often don't make records anymore at all, have done a much better job adapting to that format change than newspapers have, which have been, wedded to, one delivery format that is now going away. Every day people vote in the marketplace that, I'm holding up my phone here for people listening, that this is how people prefer to consume their news.
Even I bought advertising on Facebook once, and you're exactly right. I geofenced it to maybe 200 miles from where we were located, and I put in two age groups, like 16 to 20, and then like kind of 30s to 50s, because those are the people who listen the most.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. Like, I got 2,000 impressions in the first day.
Yeah.
And
I don't mean to talk bad about the Roanoke Times, but had you bought an ad in the Roanoke Times,
it would have been more, because I paid $20 and I got 2,000 impressions.
Yeah, and depending on what you're selling, maybe that would have been the best way to reach a bigger audience. But if you're in the case of the wedding photographer, who's not going to drive hundreds of miles to
it's hard
handle
to get
a wedding.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of print newspaper in 10 years?
Most print newspapers will be gone in their print function. They are, the exceptions will be some local weeklies will hang on in print. And the big newspapers, the Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, they will do just fine.
Yeah.
For various reasons.
I look at the New York Times almost every day. I don't get the paper.
Yeah.
I just pull up the website, and you still get the big stories, but it's not nearly. We talked about this with Beth Macy just a little bit. They said trying to sit down and read their Roanoke Times in not the Roanoke Times, the New York Times in one day is nearly impossible. It's so big. They said nobody does it. But they said you get a lot more with it, but you can get a lot of stuff from the website. Mm-hmm. And that's what most people tend to do now. I don't know anybody that gets the New York Times in print.
Yeah. And the internet has been great for papers like that. I don't know whether you're looking at free or paying a subscription, but before they could only sell a subscription for as far as they could truck the newspaper. So they were limited by physical constraints. Now they can sell subscriptions all around the world, and there are people all around the world, who want to know what the U.S. government is doing. In the case of the Wall Street Journal, what the U.S. financial system is doing. So they've been able to bring in a lot more, online subscribers, whereas your local daily paper, I always tell people, I hate to tell you, but the interest in Roanoke, runs out at some point.
That's true.
So a local paper can't monetize those subscriptions, all around the world the way some of those big papers can. So many of those, they will be out of the print business. They will remain only online, and so they are right now in there's sort of a land rush going on, to establish themselves in that online space.
Yeah. The Cardinal News has done very well with that. And that kind of leads me into my next question. What was your decision process like for leaving the Roanoke Times and going to the Cardinal News?
Sure. At the time, I was the editorial page editor of the Roanoke Times. I was a staff of one. And I thought, man, this is a great job that I can retire from, that they will always, that my job will be safe because they will always want to have an editorial page. At some point, I began to think that assumption might not be correct. The specific impetus was in the spring of 2021. The paper had yet another round of layoffs precipitated by the things we've just talked about. It's not the newspaper companies are evil or stupid. They just have a math problem as, revenues decline because they're going to, social media. So there's yet another round of layoffs. And in the aftermath of that, we reorganized, the paper reorganized with a smaller staff. We had a staff meeting, and we were told a couple things. One, we were told there would no longer be capacity to do any in-depth reporting. Okay. And also the paper was going to eliminate the political beat. Now, that wasn't my beat, but like I said, earlier I was, political junkie, and, the paper had a long, proud tradition of covering politics going back to before I was born. And the idea that, all that was going to be thrown away was, just anathema to me. And so that started the wheels turning, is there something I could do, One of my colleagues at the paper, Luann Rife, decided to retire at that point. And about a week after she retired, she got a call from a local foundation that she had been familiar with. The fellow who ran the foundation was very upset about what was happening in the local paper and basically said, I'll give you $100,000 a year if you can go start something. Well, you can't start a news organization. I mean, $100,000 is, more money than I've ever had in my pocket. Let me assure you. But, you can start something for $100,000. On the other hand, man, that sure looks good if you're going around to potential donors to say, we've already got a commitment of $100,000, So very shortly after that, my path and Luann's path intersected, and Cardinal was born. In the space of about 3 months, neither of us have raised any money before in our lives. I mean, we were journalists. We didn't deal with money. We deal with words. But in the space of about 3 months, we raised about $350,000, which was enough to launch in September 2021 with a staff of 3, me as editor and 2 reporters. Today, we have a staff of 8 reporters, soon to be 9. And the total staff is about 15, because, we have development people, even, Luann is on as executive director. We have a copy editor, a digital editor. There's a lot more to it than just, the reporting side.
I'm sure you have various different expenses throughout, like with the web hosting and everything, and someone who has to take care of that.
Yeah.
And the main cost in news is labor. You got to pay people. But I talked about how the interest in news has not gone away, and we're evidence that it hasn't. People are are willing to pay for it. Now, we are free. Our model is based on like public broadcasting. We don't have a paywall. We rely on donations. But people recognize what has happened and to the news business, and people will donate and do donate. And so here we are.
Yeah, it's exciting. I didn't realize that the Cardinal News was only just a few years old.
Yeah. I mean, we are still inventing things every day. It's not like the newspaper where there's like a century of tradition of we've always done it that way. Here it's like every day's, we're doing things for the first time.
Something new. Luke and I were discussing it yesterday. The output that the Cardinal News has is impressive. It seems like every day there's multiple articles coming out on multiple different topics.
That's the goal. Is we publish new content every day, Monday through Friday. We generally don't put up new content on weekends because online traffic goes down on weekends. If there's breaking news, we will post it. But in terms of a regular schedule, that's just not when people are going online to get news. And in the beginning, with small staff, the goal was to have one story a day. Now we're doing multiple stories a day.
Yeah. We saw one that you posted this week about Senator Bill Stanley and the hazing that goes on. Do you have contacts at the Capitol that you use, or do you just
one, we've got a full-time reporter in Richmond. Talking about how I was unhappy that the paper had done away with its political beat. So when we set out, our goal was we're gonna cover politics. We're gonna the Roanoke Times back in the day used to have someone in Richmond full time. Okay, by golly, so one of our first two reporters was a reporter in Richmond full time. And we have contacts there. Plus again, we're in a whole new world. All the General Assembly sessions are available online. Before I came on with y'all today, I was watching a committee meeting.
It's available.
Anybody can watch them. And they're archived. So if you miss them, you can go back and watch them later. You have to enjoy a particular type of pain to do that sometimes.
That's something I hadn't considered. So when you founded the Cardinal News, your focus was politics, and that's originally how I discovered the Cardinal News. We interviewed Gwen Williams, and this was around the time where there was a bit of controversy around him and his campaign. How do you not cross the line of being too polemic or controversial, but still getting the attention that you need in order to sustain the business?
Our goal is to be very nonpartisan and very
you are
fact-based.
Yeah.
So
just be that.
Yeah. I mean,
okay. Simple as that.
And y'all's focus is South Side and Southwest VA. Yeah. And that's really neat. Normally the focus with Virginia does get put on
Nova, Richmond.
And the Eastern Shore. But it's really neat that y'all focus on our area, which is cool to see. And it is very professional.
It is, yeah.
It is. So
it's also nice that, like you said, you don't have a paywall.
And you're seeing that
go away
a lot. I mean, especially even local papers.
Yeah. Our local paper now has a paywall. You can do 3 articles without paying, and then after the third, you have paywall and you have to subscribe.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. I understand, of course, but it is challenging.
When that didn't exist for so many years, and all of a sudden it's popping up, it can be frustrating. But
Do you find yourself wanting to do maybe collaborations or work with other papers around the state or country?
Not that much. Um, you know the the online world is different. I mean, we set out to cover Southwest and South Side. We still do. That's who we are. Um, but I tell people we have accidentally built a statewide audience because the internet knows no bounds, and we have a lot of readers in Northern Virginia and Richmond, um, and often hear from them. They ask us, well, I mean, I ask them, why you're reading, why are you reading us? We're writing about, you know, Franklin County, not Fairfax County. Um, Trying to think of some alliteration for Carroll County, and I'm coming up short there. Um, but their answer is, usually along the lines of, you're telling us about a part of the state we don't know anything about. So that's a long way of saying, in the old days, with a print newspaper, again, you were physically limiting to how far you could distribute the product. Some collaboration, might have been useful. Now, we can reach whoever we feel we want to reach. We're that said, there are some collaborations we have. We have a collaboration with WVTF, the public radio station. Every week they interview one of the people from our staff about some story we've done. And that's a win-win all around. They get content, and we get awareness drawn to to our site. We have done something similar with Blue Ridge Public Television. So there are some collaborations out there that we're doing, and we'll do more of.
For the time being, do you foresee the Cardinal News being strictly text based, or do you see yourself expanding to maybe audio or visual form?
We do want to get into podcasting, and are actively exploring that now. That's not something we know anything about. That is not our native language at all. But it's something we want to. I think we will always be primarily word text based. But sort of the philosophy is, we want to reach people where they are. So if there are people who prefer to consume their news, through a podcast, then we want to figure out how to do a podcast. We've done a little bit of video. I mean, I don't see us, having a studio and,
Especially if you don't have an office, it could be hard.
Yeah. Well, you can do it from home,
But, sure.
I don't see that, but, we've done some video on some stories. And I see us doing more of that. We've recently been making a push on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I follow the page on Instagram, and daily I see stuff published.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is all very new. We really didn't start doing that till maybe the last quarter of 2023. And the focus then was Instagram, not TikTok, but figure, well, we got this, let's put it on TikTok, and started getting engagement there. So, well, okay, let's try that.
I think, and this is something I felt has been missing from the news industry for a while, I think even something as simple as someone verbally reading the text on the page would be helpful, because like when I'm driving, I would still like to maybe read an article that, say, the Cardinal News published, but obviously I can't read while I drive. Mm-hmm. And if something was available to just simply read the words on the page so that I can listen while I'm driving, it doesn't have to be any additional content, just a voice. I think that could be beneficial.
Well, your self-driving car will take care of that in a few years.
That's true. But at the time, currently, I don't have that option. It's a bit out of my budget. One last thing we didn't mention, you might want to say a few things about it. You're an active playwright. You have a few different performances, from what I can understand, throughout the country. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. I tell people that I make so much money from playwriting that I get to have a day job. There's absolutely no money in it whatsoever. Yeah, unless you're famous enough to have something on Broadway. But um, I'm not there. Yeah, I do write plays. I've had about 24 published and produced. I've been produced in 48 states and 18 countries altogether. And like I said, that is providing so much money, I get to have a day job.
Right.
Me and Ethan, we don't write plays, but we dabble in reading them.
Yeah.
We're a big fan of Our Town. We're actually doing a review on it on the podcast in a few weeks. So,
do you see a lot of similarities between playwriting and journalism, or is it kind of a separate passion?
It is. To me, to my mind, it's completely separate. I suppose that, if you had a Venn diagram, there would be a little bit of overlap, in the sense that both are telling stories and both are using words, but to me, it's like different parts of the brain.
Right, creative writing. Yeah, sure.
Have you considered acting in plays?
I'm not an actor. I mean, sort of for the same reason. I'm not a. I have no desire to participate in politics, and I enjoy watching them just like I enjoy watching sports. But I'm not going to run out on the field.
Do your plays follow a specific theme?
Most of them are very light comedies.
I read on your website that you mentioned two plays. The names are escaping me, but that one is a comedy and one is strictly not. Can you kind of delve into what you mean?
I do have a few that are very much not comedies. The one I'm probably most proud of that's not a comedy is called 57 Hours in the House of Culture.
Yes, that was it, yeah.
It is based on a true story that is not well known in the United States. In 2002, took place in Moscow, in Russia. In 2002, Chechen terrorists who were advocating for independence for a little piece of Russia, or Russia considered it Russia, the Chechens considered it not Russia. That was the gist of the problem right there. They took over a theater in Moscow during the performance of a very popular Russian musical. They held about 800 people hostage for 57 hours. The Russian solution to this was to pump the place full of poison gas.
Oh.
With the idea that they would just knock everyone out. Well, they were. Don't rely on the Russians to do your math for you, okay? Because they were running these very crude calculations of how much it would take, but you're talking about a big room and a lot of people, and there's just a lot of dynamic factors there. They ended up killing a whole bunch of people. Now, I'm not sure the Russian government really cared. They killed the terrorists. They didn't care about the theater goers that much. But just it's a very horrific event. I mean, imagine, you've gone out for the evening, whether it's the theater or a movie or anything else, and suddenly, you're caught up in this, hostage situation. And, this is sort of a stylized telling of that through the form of ghosts. I won't bore your listeners by going through the whole thing, but it begins. You walk into the theater. There's poison gas swirling around. Ideally, theater would use and there are dead bodies all around. And once the audience is seated, some of them start rising and telling the story of welcome to the theater. Here's the story that what unfolded.
That is interesting. Yes,
it's been performed 1.5 times One is a full production. One is a scripting hand reading. I think it's really good. It's very dark.
Are there any recordings online?
I've got video on my YouTube channel.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think YouTube knocked out the audio because there's some music in the background that the theater had the right to use, but not on YouTube. But you can look at it and get the feel for it. It's very dark. And it's very atypical. Most of my work is very light comedy.
Yeah, sounds like it was a success. As we're wrapping up, we have a few questions that we ask every interviewee, and I'll go first. Do you have any advice to younger generations looking to have a career in journalism?
Do not focus on the demise of newspapers because, as I was talking before, just because the delivery format has changed, don't get hung up on the delivery format. It would be like telling a musician, don't get hung up that, you can't buy an 8-track tape anymore. There's people still want to consume music. They just want to consume it differently. So, go sing your song, learn your guitar, whatever, there's still a future there. The big need in journalism is for local journalism. There are lots of people who want to cover national stuff, and that's great. But really, what your local government does has more impact on your life than what the national government does, most of the time. So what the Carroll County Board of Supervisors does and the Carroll County School Board does, will have more impact on, how the schools operate, what the tax rates are, zoning, lots of things that touch your life every day. What Congress does, they do some things, but, Congress is not rezoning, the corner lot to allow a new store to go in, or, raising the taxes on your property, or, recruiting a new employer to, Hillsville.
So, and I have 2 questions for you. Where do you see yourself, and where do you see the Cardinal News in 10 years?
Well, 10 years, I hope I'm still alive. I will, may or may not be retired by then. We have already exceeded in about 18 months what we set out, what we thought it would take 5 years to do. So at that point, we went and we had a strategic plan done. They said we could be 3 times bigger than we are. That also requires, 3 times as much money. So 10 years from now, I hope we're 3 times bigger than we are now.
And my next question is, what advice, it runs along the same vein as Ethan's, what advice do you have for young people who are just starting out, not specifically journalism, but just in general?
This sounds very cliched, but, some cliches are useful and true. Few things be hard work, and also don't burn bridges. You never know. Life is unpredictable, and you never know when somebody you met 10 years ago, may be useful to you.
That's certainly true. And our last question, it's a bit of a doozy. It might even be considered a cliche.
But we ask everybody that we interview this question.
And we believe that it's really indicative of a person's true character. And that is, what is the meaning of life to you?
Personally.
Well, it's 42.
Right, of course.
And you're laughing, so I hope you get the reference there.
Of course, hitchhiker.
Yeah,
of course. Well, I think that's the first 42 we've got.
Maybe we might have gotten one more, but
maybe we may have gotten one more. But it's a good one, of course.
Okay.
Is that all you want to say, or?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Of course. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Mr. Yancey. We really enjoyed talking to you.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to interview you. It's meant a lot.
Sure thing.